Tipping Spears with Hannah Becker. Today's conversation promises to be an insightful one with a remarkable guest. Whether you're joining us for the first time or you're a regular listener, we're so glad you're here. Our goal is to bring you closer to the innovative leaders and thinkers shaping our future. And today we are thrilled to welcome Anthony Vinci. Anthony is the author of The Fourth Intelligence Revolution, The Future of Espionage, and the Battle to Save America, which examines how China and AR are redefining the future of intelligence. He previously served as the first Chief Technology Officer and Associate Director for Capabilities at the National Geospatial-Intelligence Agency, and earlier in his career as an intelligence officer with postings in Iraq, Africa, and Asia. Anthony is a co-founder and CEO of Vico, a venture-backed AI company that super empowers judgment and analysis for decision makers in finance and national security. He was formerly a managing director at Cerberus Capital Management and a member of the core management team at Bridgewater Associates. He also serves as a senior advisor at Squire Patton Boggs, an Adjunct Senior Fellow at the Center for a New American Security, and is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. Anthony holds a PhD in International Relations from the London School of Economics. Welcome to Tipping Spears, Anthony.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
So can you start us off today with telling us where your story begins?
I probably most relevant to this is me signing up to be an intelligence officer. And I did that like a lot of people in my generation after 9/11 and became a case officer, which is someone who goes out and spots assets and recruits sources, human intelligence sources. And I learned the intelligence business at the farm, which is the CIA's school for learning to do this. And my first deployment out of the box was to go to Iraq, like a lot of people during that era.
So what sparked your interest in becoming an intelligence officer? Is that something you grew up wanting to do, or is it something you kind of discovered later on in your journey there?
Well, I always knew that I wanted to serve, and my father was a Marine. My brother ended up becoming a Marine. My grandfather was in the Army, and so that always was something that I sort of assumed that I might do. And 9/11 was really what tipped me over the edge to say this is the time that I need to go out and do that and defend the nation.
So what was it like to be an intelligence officer? Was it, scary to work in this space? Was it what you thought it was going to be like? Can you give us some insight as to kind of boots on the ground, what your experiences were?
It's such an interesting and great job in so many ways. I mean, you are sort of paid to be a criminal by the United States government, right? Espionage is illegal in most countries in the world, and you're sort of paid to go and find information that other governments don't want you to have. And you're doing it for this really good cause, and that it's just so intriguing and interesting, right? Who gets to do that? And it is kind of fun and adventurous in its own way. Maybe at times a little scary. Particularly if you're in a war zone, or if you're in maybe a country where if your operation goes badly, you could end up in a pretty bad position in prison or worse. But I think my memories of it are all good ones. There's another side to the job, like any other job, that a lot of people don't think about. It can be a little boring sometimes. They never show this on the movie with Jason Bourne or James Bond, that when you go collect that information and that intelligence, you have to come back and you have to write it up. And so a lot of people, spend a lot of time actually in front of a computer, writing down what you did and how you did it and what information you collected, and you also the government is entrusting you with its resources, and that means one thing: receipts. So you have to, you know, if you bought anything and you expect to get paid back for it, you have to collect your receipts and put in your report to to get paid back. And you know that, so there's some less fun parts to the job, but overall it is an interesting time. And most importantly, every day that you're doing a job like that, you feel like you're doing the mission, and you're helping to protect the country, and you're doing it with a lot of other people who feel the same way, and that's a great feeling.
Mhm. Yeah, it's truly critical service. I think in our age of technology, too many people think, if I want information, oh, it's available in like public, domain spaces, and the info that you're seeking in that role is the stuff that's not available there so readily.
Exactly. And open source intelligence,
Mhm.
what you're sort of saying is super important. And people do that. That is an intelligence officer job too. And they serve that. But sometimes you have to get information that there's no other way to get it. And that's when you call someone like a case officer, or, there are plenty of other ways to collect through satellites and through signals
Mhm.
intelligence and so forth.
Was there a particular event or person that served as, a catalyst for your career?
Well, in particular, the change in my career when I went in as the associate director and the chief technology officer at NGA, that's the National Geospatial-Intelligence Agency. I was asked to come into that role by two people, by Robert Cardillo, who was the director at the time, and by Sue Gordon, who is the deputy director. And both people had a huge effect on my career and my life, and as friends and as mentors. And Sue had a sort of legendary CIA career, and as someone who was a change agent and involved in the technology side in particular, but and thinking differently about intelligence, and who went on to be the principal deputy director of national intelligence, and which is the number two ranking intelligence officer in the country. And then Robert is one of the most impressive intelligence officers I've ever met. And he had served at a young age. He directed analysis at NGA and then at DIA, and then was the deputy director for national intelligence, who was in charge of briefing the president for years. For years, every day he went in and directly briefed the president, along with General James Clapper, who was the DNI at the time. And then he was the director at NGA. And I just learned so much from working directly with Robert, and still do. When we remain friends and even colleagues to this day. And I think that what a lot of people don't realize, when you look at leaders like that, like Robert, is um, when they're willing to take a risk and do something that's really hard. And that's the difference, I think, between a good leader and one that's just an okay leader. It's easy to go into a job like that and just get it done, make those trains run on time, and continue the mission. That's not easy. But it's straightforward. You know what to do.
Yeah.
You're prepared to do that. But to go in there and take a risk and say, I want to change how this agency does business, fundamentally transform it, that's hard. And it involves a lot of career and reputational risk. It's a lot of sleepless nights, and it's very difficult. And Robert appointing someone like me to come in and help him with that transformation, it was a big deal. I kind of look back at it now and say, I can't believe he did it, now that I'm, now it's several years later and I've reflected on it. I was a case officer, and I ran a startup. I was not your typical choice to run half an agency, and help it transform. And he took a big risk, and I respect that a lot about him. And I think he's a real great case study in how you transform these government agencies and make them better.
Yeah, it's fascinating to hear kind of the folks along your journey and how they, truly opened doors and brought you in on their team to make these changes.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So I know every journey has its hurdles. Can you tell us what some of the biggest obstacles were that you faced in your career and how you overcame them?
Well, look, going back to the transformation of these agencies, this is, the hardest thing I think you can do in government.
Mhm.
Look, some people might look and say, "Oh, well, going to Iraq and you had a gun and there were insurgents and they were trying to
Mhm.
kill you and things like that." Well, yes, like that's hard in its own way. It's a little, scary in some way, but
Mhm.
you're out there and you're doing a mission with lots of other people, you have people protecting you every day, and you're all in it as a team. When you go in and you do something like transform an agency,
Mhm.
that's hard in this entirely different way. You're battling a lot of entrenched interests,
Mhm.
not because any of those interests are malicious in a way, but
Mhm.
they have a view. Companies have a view of how things should be done. People who are
Mhm.
doing the mission and have been doing it for years have a view of how the mission should be done. And they're not being malicious about it. They're not trying to stop you because they don't believe in what you're doing. They just think they have a better way to do it. You're dealing with having to move money around.
Mhm.
You're having, and which is a very sensitive subject when you're in the government. That money is spoken for.
Mhm.
Um, and you have to be very careful with it. It's the people's money, and this is tax money that comes from citizens. So you're trying to change how someone's job works after they've been doing it for 20 years, maybe. You are dealing with very, very difficult technologies in my
Mhm.
case. I was trying to implement new forms of AI and analytics and new forms of data. These are very complicated things. So there's just so many obstacles. And it's not just one thing. When you
Mhm.
come to work in a job like that, you're dealing with 20 different things every day. So that was probably the hardest thing I tried to do in my life. And at best, I would say I was batting 300, right?
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
and I think that's not so bad.
Mhm.
That maybe a third of the things that we tried to do at that time, and it wasn't just me. There's tons of other people I was working with who had the same goals. Um, I think that there's if we're lucky, maybe a third of those things still remain in place,
Mhm.
and I think that's about as successful as you can be, and that shows you how hard it is.
Mhm. Yeah, you really hit the nail on the head with kind of the complexity of federal agencies. I feel like in the private sector, like getting organizations to update, innovate, employees to change is kind of like turning a speedboat, whereas with federal agencies, it's like getting a cruise liner turned around. It's just the regulations and the bureaucracy. And I mean, you described it so well. I think that's something that most folks just don't think about when they hear a title, chief technology officer. They're like, oh, well, he just came in, flipped some switches, and
Yeah.
updated. But you're spot on with especially with the federal agencies. It's interesting to hear your experience with that.
A lot of people, and I include myself, up until I started this job, you look at the government, you're like, it's so inefficient. It's
Oh,
it's so obvious how it should change. Why don't they just fix it? And then when you get in there, it is a wake up call, and you realize just how complex it is.
yeah.
And it's not like there's no conspiracy, there's no like simple thing where you could walk in the room and if you just convince this one
Yeah.
person or small group it will fix it. It's not like that. It's so hard and complex. There's so many players, and I have a new appreciation for it. And just going back to
Mhm.
it, that's why it's extra impressive when somebody like Robert Cardillo, who knew how hard it was, he knew how hard this was, still tries to do it. I was, ignorance is bliss. I came in and I was like, yeah, let's do this. I'm in. And he knew how hard it was going to be.
That's funny. So you were the first CTO at NGA where you worked to integrate AI into operations. And this was before most people knew what AI was, or like we're using Chat GPT on a regular basis. So you were truly on the front lines there with early AI adoption. Can you tell us kind of what you learned from that experience?
Yeah, it was early. And, we were trying to implement a certain type of AI in particular called computer vision,
Mhm.
which, people in the government and in academia and so forth had been working on computer
Yeah.
vision AI for decades. So there's nothing new about it. What was new was that it was starting to work much, much better. And then technology had matured enough where we could actually implement it. Just like these new chat models, there have been chats, AI
Mhm.
chat bots for decades, but it wasn't until OpenAI released ChatGPT 3.5 that we realized, oh wow, this technology is mature enough. So, one of my first, lessons in this was um, you have to know when the technology is mature enough to start using, and that in many ways is the hardest part because it can seem so promising when you see it on a lab bench in an R&D facility, but then when you start to test it and evaluate it and use it, it just doesn't work. And so finding that sweet spot where it's just ready enough that you can really start to implement it is very, very important. And at that time, we were right on that edge where it was just becoming useful enough. And I was also involved at that time in something called Project Maven, which was just forming, and we were implementing that also for the military. So we were doing it in intelligence at NGA for the military in Project Maven. The second lesson was that the technology issue is not actually the primary issue. That you need to wait, like I said, for the technology to be ready. But once it's ready, um, this becomes a people problem.
Mhm.
You've got to train people to use it. You've got to maybe recruit some people who can implement it and develop it. You've got to deal with that acquisition of the new technology and train the people who acquire these technologies to understand how to maybe instead of going to a traditional contractor, now you've got to work with like a tech startup, which is a completely different type of company to work with. Um, it's a systems integration problem. So it's not like this is coming in and everybody you just start using it. There's tons of other software already in place, and data is sitting in databases and other systems, and you've got to integrate this new AI into those systems. So it becomes a systems engineering problem. So that's the second lesson for me, was that it's not just about the technology, it's about all these other issues and all the other people and processes in place in your organization. And so as a CTO, it's technology was part of the job, but most of my job was working with people and with organizational structures.
Yeah, all too often folks don't even consider that in the equation of new technology adoption.
It's true. But
Mhm.
I would say most CTOs have started to realize this by now. There, I hope there are some listeners out there who are nodding their head right now, saying, "Yeah, this is it."
People are a critical component of how well that goes or does not go.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So AI is now a very hot topic. I was standing in line at the grocery store at Kroger the other day, and a 70-plus-year-old woman was trying to tell me about the problem she was having with her AI features on her phone. So, this is everyone's talking about it now. How is AI impacting intelligence and modern warfare? I know, those sectors were early adopters and, developers of this technology. But from your perspective, what have you seen as far as AI, how it's impacting that?
The most powerful thing about AI is that it does what a person can do.
Mhm.
It's not like traditional software where it's like a tool. If you use Microsoft Word or something, it's a tool. You're doing the writing. The Microsoft Word is a tool for you to help you write like a typewriter, right?
Mhm.
AI does what a person does. It can do the writing, right? And that's truly new, and that's what's so powerful and scary
Mhm.
about it. And that's what it's doing in intelligence and warfare, and I believe where this is going. Um, we're used to having pilots fly airplanes. AI lets you have autonomous airplanes and drones, and we're already starting to see that in places like the Ukraine war. But it also allows you to make parts of the intelligence process autonomous.
Mhm.
So you can autonomously collect information. So, historically, maybe there were cameras or something like this that were used to collect intelligence, right? Like a sensor. Someone still had to watch that camera or read what was coming off that sensor. And now AI can be used to watch that camera. So at NGA, what we did at that agency is satellite imagery analysis.
Mhm.
And historically, what would happen is the satellite would take a photo and it would be sent down, and a person would look at it to see what was on it, and see if anything had changed, see if there's a new missile on a TEL or aircraft in a Air Force base, in the Soviet Union or something. Well, now what could happen is that you can use AI to look at that image and tell you and do that form of analysis and say there's something new here. This is what it is. It's a Russian Bear bomber,
Mhm.
and it landed here at 9 a.m. local time, right? That's new, and it can even do more powerful forms of analysis, and develop its own views even and assessments, for example, to assess this is a threat or this is not a threat, and it's still nascent,
Mhm.
um, and there's still this trust issue. Is it really working? So we still have to do a lot of test and evaluation on it. But I believe where intelligence is going is that AI is going to do the job of most intelligence officers do today. It's going
Mhm.
to collect information. It's going to analyze that information. It's going to disseminate that information autonomously. And that's very new and very different than in the past.
So AI can expand capabilities or at scale faster than we can with humans in many contexts. What about the new threats AI is presenting to intelligence and warfare? What is it that you're kind of like, it's on your radar for, AI's expanding capabilities? This is great, but this is what I'm thinking. This is where this could go wrong, or this is what I'm worried about.
Yeah, I mean, AI, like every technology, is a two-sided coin. There's
Mhm.
very important things that it can do that can help you, and then there are threats that
Mhm.
arise because of it. One I was just alluding to, which is that now AI can monitor all these sensors,
Mhm.
and that makes it very hard to be an intelligence officer. My old job as a case officer was to go to a foreign country
Yeah.
and try to recruit someone to spy for me. And to do that, you need to walk around a city, for example,
Yeah.
secretly and
Mhm.
securely, and you need to meet someone secretly and securely. Well, now, if there are cameras everywhere and all those cameras are being monitored
Mhm.
by an AI that can alert the police at
Mhm.
any time, that job becomes very, very hard. And in the intelligence world, we call this ubiquitous technical surveillance,
Mhm.
UTS, and that is a major danger to that old job that I used to do. But there's an even scarier use of AI that I think affects all of us,
Mhm.
which is that AI can now be used to collect information on all of us and actually be used to try to influence what we do and how we think through information operations, information warfare. And that affects not just case officers like me or, politicians or presidents or generals and people in the military. It affects everybody because AI can now be used to hack your information, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So the AI company Anthropic, for example, just released a study where they showed that Chinese cyber espionage hackers had used Claude, their AI system, to automate 80 or 90% of a cyber hack. So it's automating these hacks, which is going to make them able to attack much more widely and come after anyone's data. Also, this AI can be used to, and I refer to this in my book as, it can be used to hack your mind.
Mm-hmm.
And it can do that because what AI can do, again, AI replaces or does what a person can do. Well, it can do what I did as a case officer too, which is try to assess how you think and what your motivations are, enter a dialogue with you. You know, we've all tried ChatGPT now where you get into a dialogue with it. You ask it questions, it asks you questions back, right? It tells you information. Well, you can do that, but then try to influence what you think. And that's what information operations are all about. They're trying to influence, think propaganda, right?
Mm-hmm.
Except it's not one-way propaganda where it's just showing you, something or a fake disinformation news story. It's a two-way street. You're having a conversation with it, and it can try to influence you over time because it's modeled you in this way and what your motivations are because it's collected your information, potentially. Mm-hmm. And then try to, through this dialogue, influence you. And there was another study recently in Science and in Nature, which are both scientific journals, that showed that AI is much, much more politically persuasive than traditional political advertisements. 4 times as much, in fact. Mm-hmm. So AI can be used to change your political view, to persuade you to vote a certain way or something. Now imagine if that's used by an authoritarian adversary like China or Russia or Iran or something. That's where AI becomes very, very scary and a problem for national security.
Yeah, you bring up a great point. I think a lot of folks aren't tracking on the way AI can truly customize, like to this level that we're not used to, on, what would change Anthony or Hannah's mind on something and present it in a way that, it's different what they're presenting me, it's different what they're presenting you, but just how it can be customized to the point that truly does, to your point, hack our minds.
Absolutely.
So you recently published a fantastic book, The Fourth Intelligence Revolution, The Future of Espionage, and the Battle to Save America. It's a great read. It's one of my favorite reads from this year. Can you tell us a little bit about the book and what prompted you to write it?
Yeah. Well, when I first started in intelligence, it was the Iraq and Afghanistan wars and the war on terror. And I was taught to do intelligence a certain way. Mm-hmm. And then I left intelligence and I started and ran a tech company. And then I went back into intelligence. And this time as the associate director and the CTO of NGA. And that form of intelligence that we were doing was completely different. And we were really learning to adapt to this kind of new world. It was new. We were beginning to see that China was this new adversary that was kind of the main adversary instead of, say, Al-Qaeda or something like that. And that AI and other technologies were rapidly changing how intelligence was done. So that drove me to write the book and to sort of explore this more. And I realized that intelligence had kind of changed a lot historically in America and went through these different revolutions, I call them. One was in World War II, and then the Cold War, and then after 9/11, and now we're in this new one, this fourth intelligence revolution. And that revolution was marked by 3 big things, and is marked by 3 big things. One is that intelligence, the scope of intelligence is radically expanding from just kind of political and military issues into issues of economics and economic intelligence, into science and technology issues and so forth, even into genetic intelligence. Mm-hmm. I mean, DNA information is being collected by Chinese companies like BGI Genomics, and it could be used for national security threats, for example. So intelligence is expanding. Secondly, AI is changing everything about intelligence, like we were just talking about. I mean, it is going to be used to do all the processes in intelligence, and it's going to have to be, because that's going to be the only way to keep up with the threats, and especially against adversaries like China that are also incorporating AI into what they're doing. And then there's this third thing that, in my view, is the most radical change to intelligence, which is that intelligence now targets all of us, and our information, just regular everyday people's information, is now being collected by intelligence agencies. Chinese cyber hackers are collecting your information. You can see this on the news like every day at this point. And it's being used for information operations to influence how you think and who you vote for and so forth. And we saw this in the 2016 election. We're seeing this on TikTok, which is owned by a Chinese company, and there are studies showing how it influences how people think in favor of the Chinese Communist Party, which is scary. So I call this the democratization of intelligence. So it's not just about leaders anymore, it's about everyone. But on the flip side, that's the threat. On the flip side, though, also we can all use intelligence now, right? And we can access satellite imagery commercially, which is insane when you think about it. Like, would have been unbelievable 20 years ago, and now it's just everyday course of business for people. We all look at satellite imagery when we got on Google Maps or something. And you can use this kind of these intelligence systems and tools, and you can even learn how to do intelligence. There's a citizen journalism site called Bellingcat where you can actually practice doing intelligence operations. Really, is what it is. And importantly, and this is sort of, I think, the thing that I would love for people to take away, you can use these tools to help protect yourself against these threats and against this information collection and information operations targeted at you. And you can do that by thinking like a spy, right? And using some of these tools to protect yourself or to protect your family, like your kids, who might be on TikTok and might be targeted that way. And that's the most profound change in this fourth intelligence revolution.
Yeah, the operating environment for all of us has been greatly altered, quite rapidly too.
Absolutely.
So, can you tell us a little bit? I know, kind of, to your point, cyber attacks, how our information is being utilized, or that our information is being utilized. Most folks have heard of that from somewhere, right? It's all over the news. Kind of the how of, how technology is being utilized to hack our minds. Can you explain that just a little bit more in case folks aren't tracking? It's not necessarily that, Chinese spies are all trying to get into our Yahoo email account per se. It's a little different. Can you expound on that?
Yeah. Well, first I would think about what do they want, right? And I think that, authoritarian countries have realized people are sort of the soft underbelly of America, right? We're the people who vote for who's going to run America. We are ourselves, or maybe our children, our friends, become the soldiers that will defend America. We work at companies that make the technology that are necessary to defend it. And so, if you imagine that foreign intelligence officer, right, that adversary, they're sort of saying, well, I could go after, this colonel in the Pentagon, but they're on a classified system. They're really hard to get to. Or I can go after this person who's just sitting at home, and I can still threaten. Maybe I could disrupt an election. Maybe I could sow chaos in society. Maybe I can steal the intellectual property they're working on at their company that I want to design weapons, because they're working on this AI technology, and I want to use that to design weapons that I can use to harm them, right? So they're sort of, that's why they're looking at people, and from there, how do they then target you? You know, how do they get this information from you? How do they steal that intellectual property? Well, yeah, a lot of it is cyber hacking, right? They can literally hack into your email or into your, especially your work email, and that's why, partially why, there's so much of a focus on cybersecurity now, and training people. But there are other things that they can do as well. Like they could influence you to change how you vote, or to just kind of make you not trust your government, or not trust, another political party. I don't think they even need to choose a winner. It's not like they have to pick one party or the other. They win as long as they, make you distrust one or the other party. They don't care who it is, right? And they can do this by understanding more about you, say because you're using a social media site like TikTok, where they have access to all your information. It's been established that TikTok takes your information, sends it back to China. They've been sued for this. And then they can subtly change that information. They could only send you certain stories. They could minimize and censor information. So, for example, it's been shown that on TikTok, there's a lot of censorship, of Tiananmen Square or other politically sensitive topics like Taiwan or the Uyghurs, which is an ethnic minority group in China that is persecuted by the Chinese government. So they can censor that. They can subtly change it, and it works. By the way, there's studies by a group out of Rutgers, for example, that have shown that the longer you're on TikTok, the more benevolent view you have of Chinese Communist Party human rights record. So it's like actually works when they do these subtle things. So that's some of the ways that people are targeted, and why they're targeted.
That's a great description. I think so many folks aren't even aware that they're being targeted, and you really provide a great outline of kind of the why there. My first trip on an airplane from rural Mississippi was, I thought it would be cool to go to the Summer Olympics in Beijing, China. So it was quite a wake-up call when I ended up there. And it really impressed upon me, just, in America, we had this democracy, and it was such a strength, of our nation. Like when I think of America, that's one of the first things I think about is like our democracy. And one thing that just kind of hit me stepping off the plane in Beijing was, things are different over here. It doesn't operate that way. And it's been unsettling to see how, these foreign adversaries have targeted this one thing, or kind of exploited, preyed upon this thing that makes our country what it is, which is kind of our ability to vote, and the human rights that we uphold, and how they kind of prey on that with the kind of the targeted influence operations against us. And I think you just provided a great description that so many people aren't aware that that's kind of like what's up under the hood when it comes to, they think they're just scrolling on TikTok for fitness videos, and there's a lot more going on there.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great story too. I can imagine if that was the first foreign country you went to, that must have been a real wake up call. Like you didn't even ease into it. It's true. I think most people don't realize how different life in an authoritarian country really is. It can look similar when you see a video or a photo. It can look like, oh, well, they have Starbucks, and they have, I can buy I can go to a Arc'teryx store and buy a jacket just like here, but it's completely different. And in China in particular, I think the biggest difference for most people that they would see is how much surveillance is part of life, and that everything is surveilled. There's cameras everywhere. Everything that you say or do online or on a cell phone is tracked and collected, and that can be used for control. I mean, they have a social credit system there in which, if you do the wrong thing, you can be punished. Like maybe you're not allowed to travel or something. And that's just so different than it is here.
Well, your book did a great job of describing kind of many of the mechanisms and differences there. I think just far too many people aren't aware of. So I appreciate you putting pen to paper on that.
Thanks.
So, what career advice do you have for the next generation of professionals who are interested in becoming an intelligence officer? I know it's a sector that's changing a lot, but what advice do you have for folks that would be interested in kind of following your path?
Yeah. Well, first of all, that is a very real job that you can do. I think a lot of us, when you grow up, you think of intelligence officers as, spies as like, equivalent to being a Jedi or
Mhm.
Indiana Jones or something. Like this is just the thing you see in the movie. It's not a real job. It is a real job and you can do it and you can go to college and you can get a degree and you can literally go on a website and apply for this job and get it. And that's the number one thing I tell students. Like you should look at this as a real possible career choice. And it's not as hard to get into as you would think. There's no like, it's not the days of where there's some secret recruiting cabal and
Mhm.
they, somehow pick you out of a crowd at your university or something. Like it's if it's something you want to do, if it's a mission you want to do, if you're a patriot and you want to serve your country, there's a real job you can go do it, and it's as easy as applying to it. Now, it's a hard job to get because they're
Mhm.
selecting some of the best people in the country, and you have to work hard and study. The other thing I would say, to someone thinking about it is I wouldn't necessarily just think of this as something where it's like, oh, well, somebody who studied international relations does this
Mhm.
job and who lived abroad
Mhm.
for 10 years and speaks five languages. Intelligence community needs those people still too. That's important, but it needs all sorts of other people with different skills and different backgrounds. It needs technologists. This is an emergency. Like if
Yeah.
you are a software developer, you're an AI researcher, you're someone who's interested in robotics or hardware. Like there are jobs for that in the intelligence community, and they're very important, and we need those people. But there's also people who do human resources and intelligence or accounting, right? And maybe that's what your degree is in. But I'll tell you, it's probably the coolest human resources or accounting job you're going to get. Like you're literally adding up the accounting of somebody, who's doing a secret classified mission. And maybe you're doing, some sort of cover accounting and it's pretty cool. Or you're doing human resources and your job is to recruit other intelligence officers. And like these are interesting people to be working with and helping to proceed in their careers and develop them over years, right? So, whatever kind of place you're coming from and whatever you're interested, there's probably a role in intelligence. And it's going to be one that's going to be way more interesting than any other place you're going to go, way more important, and you're going to have a much more satisfying career at the end of the day than I think you can get anywhere else. And you're going to be part of a bigger mission than just yourself.
Well, thank you so much, Anthony, for coming on the podcast and sharing your insights, your experiences. I know your contributions to our nation have impacted so many, and I just was so excited to have you on here and hear from one of my new favorite authors. So,
Well, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
and to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to this episode of Tipping Spears with Hannah Becker. We hope this conversation has sparked new ideas and challenged the way you think. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, and we'll catch you next time with another exciting guest.